Hey guys, and welcome back to Tech Tuesdays with Saptarshi. So this week I'll be reviewing the Honor 7X, Honor's take on the ever so popular Xiaomi Mi A1. On paper, it seems like the Honor 7X has the oomph to beat the Xiaomi Mi A1. But is it really so? Let's find out. Also, a huge shout out to Madhu for lending me his device. To look at the Honor 7X, it's nice and functional, if not exactly jaw-dropping. The biggest selling point in terms of aesthetics is definitely the 82.9% screen-to-body ratio. It's not quite as impressive as something like the S8 or the iPhone X, but it definitely makes it feel like a 2017 phone and puts it ahead of the Pixel 2 XL, even which can only claim 76.4%. That screen is quite square with sharp edges, which can look a little out of place on the rounded body, but it's not a big deal. The design comes in black, blue and gold, and the one I have in front of me is the blue version. As is often the case, the coloring makes itself known around the sides and across the back, which almost gives the impression of it being a very slim case. The matte finish is understated and metal construction feels premium. It's not particularly prone to picking up fingerprints like its newly launched cousin, the Honor 9 Lite. The rounded edges and weighty metal also makes this a phone that feels good to hold in the hand. There are no physical buttons and the lenses are only slightly raised on the back. All in all, I'd describe the looks of this phone as modern but not unique in any way. This is an LCD with a 1080p resolution filling 5.93 inches. If you're looking for a device that really pushes pixels for the crispest and most beautiful experience possible, then obviously this may not be the phone for you. However, I'm firmly in the camp of people who find they can't obviously see the difference unless I'm looking for it, and for most of the part, resolution is just fine. I do prefer AMOLED panels to LCDs though, as they have better color reproduction and deeper blacks. But that is completely dependent on personal taste. The only reason I'd like a few more pixels is to perhaps fit a few more elements on the screen to make use of its phablet dimensions. The colors are once again just fine, and while it's not going to be winning any awards, it's certainly perfectly serviceable and not half bad for enjoying media. The sound is also very acceptable, and the Honor 7X sticks with the tried and tested headphone jack, an increasingly hard to come by feature these days. There's only one speaker down the bottom of the device in just the right place for blocking with a finger while playing games, but it's loud enough that you can watch YouTube. Likewise, call quality seems just fine, and friends and relatives told me that I came out clearly enough even if the isolation could have been better. Connectivity has been fine too, with no dropped calls or lost signal. I'm not too fond of the fingerprint sensor though. It's around the back rather than on the home button, the cost of that screen ratio, but to its merit, it's highly responsible and very easy to find thanks to its big indentation. In short, it has worked for me instantly nearly every time, but I really prefer a fingerprint sensor mounted on the front of the device, something which is disappearing fast. The battery is 3340 mAh, which doesn't sound like an awful lot, but as we know, optimizations can make all the difference. And I am happy to report that the Honor 7X performs admirably in this department, lasting a whole day, even if you're a power user like me. I spent a typical day watching YouTube, using Google Maps to navigate, taking calls and shooting photos. Despite all of that, I only very rarely needed to top up the juice. More specifically, I'm getting around 5 hours and 31 minutes of screen on. But we must take this metric with a little grain of salt, seeing as this very much depends on what you're doing during those hours. Unfortunately, one cost-saving choice Huawei made was opting to use a micro USB port for charging. This decision does make it feel a little backwards at this point, and you'll also unfortunately be making do with slower transfer speeds and charging. That said, you will get around 54% charge in an hour, which is not bad for a mid-range device and certainly livable. Another area where the budget nature of the device starts to show is in the camera department, though it's not entirely a fail here either. On the plus side, the Honor 7X manages to keep up with yet another current trend by featuring dual lenses. The primary shooter is 16 megapixels, which is backed up by a secondary 2 megapixel lens. The purpose of the second lens is to pull off the currently popular portrait mode shots that apply fake bokeh. What's interesting though is that the 8 megapixel front-facing selfie camera is also capable of the same effect, despite having just one lens. This is obviously achieved through software trickery, which is impressive, especially as there is no discernible difference between the effects produced by either side. Applying fake bokeh means that the background gets blurred out, bringing the subject matter into stark focus. It's a nice effect when done correctly, but unfortunately the 7X misses as often as it hits, blurring out the wrong elements or sometimes neglecting to work at all. When I first got the device, for some reason the rear camera refused to do the trick at all. It's working now, so maybe it did some quick machine learning. Occasionally, applying the depth effect can produce a really nice looking photo that looks like it was taken by a much more expensive DSLR camera. But that is definitely the exception than the rule. 90% of the time, you'd be better off applying the effect by hand, just using Photoshop. The best that can be said for it is that it's fun to play around with. As for the general qualities of the camera, it's something of a mixed bag. On default settings, photos lack color and punch, and they feature a very square 4:3 resolution. In order to enjoy a more palatable 18:9, you need to drop the megapixels from 16 down to 11. There's also a lack of sharpness in some shots. So I was initially assuming I'd write the camera off as being a typical budget camera, but then I started playing in the settings and I was gradually won over. There are a ton of features and settings here. Turning up the saturation on the photos and switching resolution helped a great deal, as did turning on HDR. There's a pro mode for both photos and video. There's a light painting option for tracking the lights of cars or the movement of stars even. And there are a whole bunch of filters and other settings for getting better performance out of the shooter. Granted, a lot of these same things could be accomplished via a third-party app, but it's still nice to have the options built in so that you can enjoy playing with the camera out of the box. With a little work, you can take some pretty good photos then, and the sheer number of options and settings is praiseworthy. It's not up there with the cameras on more expensive flagships. It's not one you can point and shoot and trust to capture a great image. Low light photos leave something to be desired and the autofocus can be finicky, but Huawei has gone above and beyond the call of duty to make the most of the hardware, and I really enjoy playing with it. In terms of power, the Honor 7X is sporting a Kirin 659 octa-core processor running 4 cores at 2.36 GHz and 4 at 1.7 GHz, and with a Mali T830 GPU. There are 2 variants on offer, one with 32 GB of storage and 4 GB of RAM, and one with 64 GB of storage and 4 GB of RAM. Depending on the model, your experience may vary, and I would suggest going for the 64 GB internal storage version for snappier performance. For those looking for extra storage, the Honor 7X will take an SD card up to 256 GB. With those specs, this definitely isn't going to compete with the top players in terms of raw performance. But as with most handsets, the power here is ample for pretty much any conceivable use case. It will play pretty much any game on the Play Store, and navigation around the UI is plenty nippy. It only gets slightly warm when running benchmarks or 3D titles, but it's not enough to be that noticeable, even with the metal construction. Some of that UI nippiness may be a result of the software. The Honor 7X is running Android 7.0 Nougat with the EMUI 5.1 running on top. For the most part, it's pretty close to stock, but the tweaks that have been introduced are okay on the whole. I'm personally not a big fan of the notification tree, which overlaps the software navigation buttons when fully extended. There are a few other UI missteps. I had to switch to Nova Launcher on the double to get my app drawer back, but otherwise it stays pretty much out of the way, and there are actually a couple of welcome customizations here. I like the option to capture scrollable screenshots, for instance, and apparently some of the machine learning magic is going on in the background to improve resource management. Huawei calls this Huawei Ultra Memory, and I must say that I have been impressed on numerous occasions when I've switched back to apps I last used hours ago and found them still open. Likewise, an ultra response feature claims to be able to register touches faster to allow for more silky smooth swiping and scrolling. On the whole, I'd probably rather have stock Android, but actually this is a pretty good software experience. And of course, all of the modern features of Android are very welcome, including multitasking and Google Assistant. In conclusion then, the Honor 7X is not a perfect phone, and its low price does show. Its camera is not outstanding, its display may not be among the best, and its design may be plain and simple. But when it comes to a device at its price, there is barely any other device which can beat what it can offer. But those are really the only major compromises, and at its asking price, it is quite impressive actually. But the Honor 7X frankly blows it out of the water with a higher resolution display, a better fingerprint sensor, an interesting camera setup, and many more features which are actually not offered at this price point. From now on, this is the phone I will be recommending to people who have a little less to spend but they want the best possible experience. At a price of 12,999 for the 32GB variant and 15,999 for the 64GB variant, the Honor 7X is definitely one of the best devices out there at its price point. And coming to the initial question, is it better than the Xiaomi Mi A1? Definitely. If you enjoyed this video, do give it a big thumbs up. And also, if you are new to my channel, press the subscribe button below and press the bell notification icon to get notified about my future videos. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.